At 11:42 p.m., a widowed single father sent a text he would spend the rest of the night trying to undo. I love you. It wasn't meant for his wife. It wasn't meant for anyone alive, but it reached his boss instead. The phone screen glowed in the darkness. Caleb's thumb hovered over the send button for only a second before muscle memory took over. The apartment was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator and Noel's soft breathing from the bedroom. His chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped a belt around his ribs and pulled. The loneliness tonight was different, sharper. It had teeth. He typed the words without thinking, without looking. His hands knew what his heart needed to say. I love you. I don't know how to do this without you. Send. The message flew into the void where all his late-night confessions went. Except this time, when his eyes focused on the name at the top of the screen, his stomach dropped through the floor. Not Elena, not his wife, Maribel Cross, his boss, the woman who controlled everything, his paycheck, his daughter's therapy, the health insurance that kept them afloat, the CEO who fired people for missing quarterly projections. Hi, friend. Before we continue the story, kindly tell us where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button now for you to get more. And I have something new for you tomorrow. Stay tuned. Thanks. Let's continue. Caleb's hands started shaking. He fumbled for the delete option, his fingers slipping across the screen. Too late. The word appeared beneath his message like a death sentence. Read. 3 dots appeared at the bottom of the screen. She was typing. His heart hammered against his chest wall. The dots moved, stopped, moved again, then disappeared. No response. Just silence. The kind of silence that meant consequences were coming and there was nowhere left to hide. What would you do if one mistake could cost you everything that's keeping your family alive? Caleb sat on the edge of the couch, phone clutched in both hands, staring at the screen like it might explode. 2 a.m, 3, 4, no sleep. Just the ceiling fan spinning overhead and the weight of what he'd done pressing down on his chest. Maribel Cross wasn't just any boss. She was the kind of woman business magazines put on covers with headlines like The Ice Queen of Wall Street and How Maribel Cross Built an Empire Without Mercy. She'd inherited nothing and crushed everyone who underestimated her. Caleb had seen her fire a senior VP in the middle of a conference call without raising her voice. He'd worked at Crosswell Holdings for 3 years and had spoken to her exactly twice. Both times she'd looked through him like he was furniture. And now this. He tried to unsend the message. The option was grayed out. He tried to rationalize it. Maybe she'd think it was a technical error. Maybe she wouldn't even remember his name. But she'd read it. At 11:43 p.m., which meant she'd been awake too, which meant she'd seen every word. The 3 dots had appeared again at 1:17 a.m. He'd watched them pulse on the screen for 45 seconds before they vanished. No explanation, no response, nothing. That silence felt like a noose tightening. By 6 a.m., Caleb's hands were numb from gripping the phone. His throat was dry. He kept running through worst-case scenarios. Termination, blacklisting, losing the apartment. The sun started to rise, pale light creeping through the blinds. Then came the knock. Who shows up at your door at dawn when your entire life is about to collapse? Caleb jerked upright from the couch, his neck stiff from hours of sitting in the same position. The knock came again. Not loud, controlled, deliberate. He glanced towards Noel's bedroom. The door was still closed. She was still asleep, curled up under the blanket covered in stars that used to be Elena's. She'd cried herself out last night, asking the question she always asked before sleep. Do you think Mom would still recognize me? Caleb never knew how to answer, so he just held her until her breathing evened out and her grip on his shirt loosened. He stood slowly, his legs unsteady beneath him. The knock came a 3rd time. Whoever it was wasn't leaving. Through the peephole, Caleb saw a figure in a long dark coat, hair pulled back tight, posture perfect even in the dim hallway light. His blood turned to ice. Maribel Cross. Not her assistant. Not building security. Not HR. Her. He opened the door halfway, his body blocking the view inside. She didn't look angry. That was worse. Her eyes were sharp and clear, taking in everything. His wrinkled shirt, the shadows under his eyes, the toys stacked too neatly by the wall. "I need to speak with you," she said. Her voice was calm, steady, like she was delivering a quarterly report. Caleb's throat closed. He nodded because words wouldn't come. She stepped forward. He moved aside. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like a cell locking. What does the most powerful woman in your world want when she shows up uninvited at dawn? Maribel didn't sit. She stood in the center of the small living room, hands folded in front of her, scanning the space like an appraiser. The couch that doubled as Caleb's bed, the stack of unpaid bills on the kitchen counter, Noelle's pink backpack hanging by the door, a half-finished coloring book on the coffee table. Caleb's heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his neck. He waited for her to say something. Anything. The silence stretched until it felt like the walls were closing in. Finally, she turned to face him. Who was that message meant for? Her tone wasn't cold. It was careful, like she already knew the answer but needed to hear him say it. Caleb swallowed. His mouth was desert dry. "My wife," he said quietly. "She passed away." Maribel's jaw tightened. Not in pity, in something else. Recognition, maybe. She turned away from him and walked toward the window, her heels barely making a sound on the worn carpet. "Do you know how many people lie to me every day?" she asked. Caleb didn't answer. She stood with her back to him, looking out at the city waking up below. The light caught the edge of her profile. For the first time, she didn't look like a CEO. She looked like someone carrying weight no one else could see. Then she turned, and everything shifted. What truth is she about to say that will change everything you thought you knew? Maribel's eyes locked onto Caleb's. The air between them felt charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. "I know exactly what it's like," she said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "to text someone who isn't there anymore." Caleb's breath caught. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone. For just a second, she angled the screen toward herself. Caleb saw the lock screen. Not a corporate logo, not a stock ticker. A name, a child's name. "I built everything I have," Maribel continued, her voice steady but fracturing at the edges. "Because I lost my son." The room went silent. Even the street noise outside seemed to fade. 10 years ago," she said, "he was 6, same age as your daughter." Caleb couldn't move, couldn't speak. The woman who terrified entire boardrooms was standing in his living room confessing the one thing she'd never told anyone. "I come to work at 5 a.m., she said, "because going home feels like failing him all over again." Her hand tightened around the phone. "Every night I draft messages I'll never send. Apologies, updates, promises I can't keep." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and for the first time since she walked in, the power imbalance collapsed. They weren't boss and employee anymore. They were two people drowning in the same ocean. Then the knock came, harder this time. Maribel's expression shifted. The vulnerability vanished. Her shoulders straightened. Someone else was here, and from the look on her face, this visitor was the real threat. Who just arrived that makes the most powerful woman you know look afraid? The door swung open before either of them could move. A man in a charcoal suit stepped inside without asking permission. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine, his smile calculated and cold. Darren Holt. Caleb recognized him from the executive floor. Board liaison. The man who decided which departments got funding and which ones got gutted. Darren's eyes moved from Maribel to Caleb, then swept across the apartment with open disdain. The toys, the cramped kitchen, the evidence of a life barely held together. "Maribel," Darren said, his voice smooth as oil, "I didn't expect to find you here." Maribel's face became stone. The vulnerability from seconds ago erased completely. "This is a private conversation," she said. Darren laughed. Not loud, just enough to show he wasn't intimidated. "Private?" He glanced at Caleb. "You're in an employee's apartment at 6 in the morning. There's nothing private about this." He pulled out his phone. tapped the screen twice, then turned it toward Maribel. Caleb couldn't see what was on it, but he saw her expression tighten. The board received an interesting notification last night, Darren continued. A text message sent from a company device. Inappropriate content. Emotional instability. Caleb's stomach turned over. You flagged my personal phone? Maribel's voice was deadly quiet. Company property, Darren said. Everything is monitored. You signed the agreement yourself. He turned to Caleb, his smile widening. Single father, high stress, unstable home environment. These are the exact liabilities we've been trying to eliminate from high-level operations. Caleb felt his fist clench. Darren noticed. Don't, Darren said, his tone almost playful. That'll only make this easier. Maribel stepped between them. Her voice cut through the room like a blade. You have no authority here. Darren tilted his head. I have a board meeting in 3 hours, and I have screenshots of a CEO compromising herself over an employee's personal crisis. He paused. Unless you'd like to explain to the shareholders why you're emotionally involved with staff? The trap snapped shut. Caleb realized the truth in that moment. The text hadn't just exposed him, it had exposed her, and Darren intended to use it to destroy them both. When the most powerful person you know is cornered, what happens to everyone standing beside her? Darren moved further into the apartment, hands in his pockets, inspecting the space like he was touring a condemned building. He stopped in front of the small table where Noelle's drawings were stacked. Princesses, rainbows. A family of 3 with one figure crossed out in black crayon. Cute, Darren said flatly. He turned back to Caleb. How long have you been working at Crosswell? 3 years, Caleb said, his voice tight. And in those 3 years, how many times have you requested extended leave? Therapy accommodations? Flexible scheduling? Caleb didn't answer. 14 times, Darren said, pulling up something on his phone. 14 requests for special treatment because of personal circumstances. That's a pattern. Those were approved, Maribel said sharply. By you, Darren replied, which is exactly the problem. He stepped closer to Caleb, lowering his voice like they were sharing a secret. You're not a bad guy, I get it. Life handed you something terrible. But this company isn't a charity. We can't afford to keep people who can't perform at full capacity. It's not personal. It's numbers. Caleb felt heat rising in his chest. Not anger, shame. Because part of him had always believed the same thing. Darren turned back to Maribel. If you walk away now, this stays quiet. He gets severance. You keep your position. Everyone moves on, and Maribel didn't move. But if you fight this, Darren continued, his voice hardening, I go to the board with everything. The text, this visit, your judgment. And they won't just remove him, they'll remove you. The room went silent. Caleb looked at Maribel. She was staring at Darren, her expression unreadable. Then she spoke. Get out. Darren raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? You heard me, Maribel said. Get out of this apartment now. Darren's smile faded. He glanced at Caleb, then back at her. You're making a mistake. No, Maribel said quietly. I'm done making the mistake of listening to men like you. Darren's jaw tightened. He headed toward the door, then stopped. You have until noon to resign, he said, or I make this public. The door closed behind him. Maribel stood perfectly still, her hands trembling just slightly. Then she turned to Caleb and whispered the words that changed everything. What do you do when standing up for what's right means losing everything you've built? Maribel walked to the window and pressed her palm against the glass. The city stretched out below, cold and indifferent. Caleb didn't know what to say. Didn't know if there was anything left to say. I built this company from nothing, Maribel said, her voice barely audible. I worked 100-hour weeks. I sacrificed relationships, time, sleep. I gave up everything. She turned to face him. And I told myself it was worth it, that if I could just build something strong enough, permanent enough, I'd never feel powerless again. Her eyes were dry, but the pain in them was raw. But it didn't work, because no matter how much power you have, You can't bring back the people you've lost. Caleb's throat tightened. If I leave now, Maribel continued, Darren gets what he wants. You lose your job quietly. I keep mine, and we both go back to pretending we're fine. She stepped closer. But if I stay and fight, they'll come for both of us. They'll tear apart everything you've built here. Your reputation, your ability to provide for your daughter. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I need to know if you're strong enough to stand with me, because this won't be clean, and it won't be fair. Caleb looked toward Noelle's bedroom. The door was still closed. She was still asleep, unaware that her father's entire world was collapsing in the next room. He thought about Elena, about the promises he'd made to her, to take care of their daughter, to keep going, to not let grief destroy them. And he realized something. Running wasn't protecting Noelle. It was teaching her that the world wins when you're afraid. He looked back at Maribel. I'm in, he said. Maribel exhaled slowly, then nodded. All right, she said. Then we do this together. When two broken people decide to stop hiding, what kind of storm are they about to walk into? Maribel pulled out her phone and began typing rapidly. Caleb watched her fingers move across the screen with the precision of someone who'd built an empire on calculated risks. I'm calling an emergency board meeting, she said without looking up. If Darren wants transparency, we'll give him exactly that. Caleb's pulse quickened. What are you going to tell them? The truth, Maribel said. She stopped typing and met his eyes. That I made a human connection with an employee who needed support. That I've spent 10 years hiding behind professionalism because I was terrified of being seen as weak. And that I'm done apologizing for caring about people. She hit send. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of what they just committed to hung in the air between them. Then Maribel did something Caleb never expected. She smiled. Not a corporate smile, not a polite gesture. A real smile. Small, tired, but genuine. You know what's strange, she said. I've been CEO for 8 years. I've closed billion-dollar deals. I've stared down hostile takeovers. And this is the first time I've ever felt like I was actually fighting for something that mattered. Caleb felt something shift in his chest. Not hope exactly, but something close to it. They weren't alone anymore. From Noelle's room came the sound of small feet hitting the floor. The door creaked open. Noelle appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes, her hair a mess of curls. Daddy? She said sleepily. Then she saw Maribel and froze. Maribel crouched down slowly, making herself smaller. Hi, she said gently. I'm Maribel. I work with your dad. Noelle looked at Caleb for confirmation. He nodded. Are you here to help him? Noelle asked. Maribel's expression softened. Yes, she said. I am. Noelle considered this, then walked over and took Caleb's hand. Good, she said, because he needs help sometimes, even when he says he doesn't. Caleb's eyes burned. Maribel stood, composing herself. I have to go, she said, but I'll see you at the office. She headed for the door, then paused. Thank you, she said quietly, for reminding me what courage actually looks like. The door closed behind her. Caleb looked down at his daughter. You hungry? He asked. Noelle nodded, and for the first time in months, Caleb felt like maybe they were going to be okay. What happens when the people who were supposed to destroy each other decide to save each other instead? The board meeting was set for 2 p.m. Caleb dropped Noelle at school and took the subway to Midtown, his heart hammering the entire ride. The Crosswell building rose above him like a judge's bench. Cold, unyielding, final. He rode the elevator to the 42nd floor. Maribel was already there, standing outside the conference room in a suit that looked like armor. Her expression was calm, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. Ready? She asked. Caleb nodded. They walked in together. The board members were already seated. 12 faces. Darren sat at the far end, arms crossed, looking smug. Maribel didn't sit. She stood at the head of the table and placed her phone face up in front of her. I received a message last night, she began, from an employee who made a mistake. A personal message sent to the wrong person. Darren leaned forward, ready to interrupt. Maribel raised a hand. And that mistake saved my life. The room went silent. For 10 years, she continued, her voice steady, I've run this company believing that strength meant isolation, that leadership meant never showing weakness. But that message reminded me of something I'd forgotten. She looked directly at Darren. That connection isn't weakness. It's the only thing that makes any of this worth doing. She gestured to Caleb. This man lost his wife. He's raising a daughter alone. And he's still showing up every day and doing exceptional work. That's not a liability. That's exactly the kind of person we should be fighting to keep. Darren stood. This is emotional manipulation, he said. The board doesn't operate on feelings. Maribel turned to face him fully. No, she said. We operate on results. And I have the numbers to prove that empathy-driven leadership outperforms fear-based management in every metric that matters. She tapped her phone. A presentation appeared on the screen behind her. Retention, productivity, innovation. All higher in departments where managers show genuine care for their teams. The board members leaned in. Maribel's voice grew stronger. So here's what I'm proposing. Either we change the culture of this company to reflect the values that actually drive success, or you find yourself a new CEO. Because I'm done pretending that cruelty is strategy. Darren's face turned red. You can't threaten this board. I'm not threatening, Maribel said calmly. I'm offering clarity. She looked around the table. Vote now, support this shift, or accept my resignation. The room held its breath. One by one, hands began to rise. Not all of them, but enough. Darren stared in disbelief as the majority voted in Maribel's favor. She straightened her jacket and turned to Caleb. Let's get back to work, she said. As they walked out together, Caleb felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not just relief, purpose. The mistake that should have destroyed him had instead opened a door neither of them knew existed. And on the other side was a future neither of them had to face alone. This is just the beginning of their story. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter where everything they've built will be tested in ways they never imagined. More stories that inspire are coming your way. Hit that button now. When one mistake changes everything, what comes next is either destruction or redemption. Which will they choose?